I think, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Swapnil. We have Vaishali missing. I'm sure she'll join us in 2, 3 minutes. So we have Gayatri, who heads the CSR and Sustainability Wing and Godrej Group. And we have Derek from Charities Aid Foundation International. So I think last or the recent panels since morning had a reasonable mention of data and tech, largely, right? In the last panel, LM Singh sir spoke about data is the new oil. There is a data-driven or data-backed evidence or data-backed policy which is required. So I think the need or the essence that why data in tech is required, I don't need to stress upon a lot. Everyone here would agree that data in tech is something which we largely need, right? So just to start with, I think I wanted to do close your eyes, but I think Neera did it in the morning. So I don't want to, it looked like I'll copy. So I think what I want to start with is, and I have Gayatri and Derek here. So maybe if from your personal experience or your professional experience, if you can tell us any application or any platform which you guys use day in and day out, which has changed your life in a positive impact, right? And I mean, it could be personal, it could be professional, right? And also on the flip side, if there's something which you don't want to continue now, right, which has become single most reason. And I mean, if you want that, you want to do away with that application. So maybe if you want to start with that, I can start with Gayatri. You can just give an example.
Yeah. I think I don't think it's possible as somebody who was born at a time without mobile phones and grew up without a mobile phone and technology. Sometimes it's hard to imagine living life today without all of that. And I think it's definitely been, your question really made me reflect on these, on these applications that I've found particularly useful in my personal life, whether it's things like Zero Dha, from which I understood how to actually invest in stocks very recently, and things like, I don't know, the health app on a phone, which you can keep track of how much you're moving, sleeping, etc. And the one thing that made me realize why these applications were so useful, because I immediately thought of our sustainability MIS at Godrej, and then separately of our CSR MIS, which you guys run. And I wondered, how come that is so easy to use and these two seem harder? And it's because it's pulling data that no one has to really fill in and make that effort or change behaviors and learn new things in order to use that technology effectively. So, I think there's a big case for, platforms that pull from existing, and, you guys do this at Dhwani to some degree, that pull from existing data sets to make, meaningful analyses and insights.
I would say probably banking apps are the thing that has completely changed my life. I've always had roles that typically involved a certain amount of travel, and I think about the basics of getting foreign exchange currency, getting managing your bank account when you're abroad, calling the telephone banking thing, paying like the international charge because the 0800 number doesn't work, all this sort of stuff. Banking apps have completely changed that. And then when you extend banking apps into payments, in many cases you don't need local currency anymore. And what I try to do for a living is create a borderless world for philanthropy, where people can give across borders as seamlessly as possible. And you think, well, the banking apps are a fantastic kind of star to aim for. Without doubt, there are two apps that I would absolutely destroy and ban. One is the dietary app I use that monitors my caloric intake. Although I occasionally spin some of that, you know what I mean? But my donuts are usually very, very small in the app, only a few grams each. And the second one I would absolutely destroy is the fitness app that tells me how little I've moved all day. So, I mean, it's a little bit like having your accountant look at your finances. I mean, I'm in severe debt every single day of my life. So I just, but in all seriousness, that transparency I think is important. And I think the transparency of those kind of personal apps are really helpful.
Great, great. So I think Vaishali, we're just discussing that any application or platform which you feel has changed your life, and on the flip side, any application or platform would you would not want to continue or you don't like, right? You want to destroy. So any examples, personal, professional, anything?
I think, sorry for joining late, but yeah, in terms of app or platform, I wouldn't say any one, but I would say in terms of the mobile ultimately coming together to be the single point of, not just for me, for every, even a rural Indian, to be one platform, one device across multiple apps that, come together. So even as all of us are attending here, I'm sure we are doing a lot of our office work through the mobile over various apps that are there. But yeah, if you want to discontinue or so, I wouldn't really. That's a call, which is a very difficult call.
Okay, okay, great. So I would also like to weigh in my fair share. So I think within metro cities now this new thing which has come is quick commerce. So I'm not sure, Derek, you guys have that luxury, but in India we have that luxury that in 5 minutes you can order anything and it will be at your door, right? So my 4-year-old kid, and how he messes up with this is like now he knows that he can order anything at any point in time and it will get him, right? So the other day at 12 in the night he said, I want to play snakes and ladders. And I said, where will I get snakes and ladders at 12 in the night? And he's like, no, you order through Blinkit, you will get it, right? And I literally looked at Blinkit and there was an option that you can order board games. And once you order, it has a very nice journey where they show, right? So there was a graphic which shows that a lady is packing. Then there is a graphic which shows that a delivery man is waiting at the door, I mean, to pick up that order. And then the entire map of that it is reaching to your door, right? So, I became that kid who was literally glued to that screen, that how come in that chilly weather of 2 degrees, someone is literally just coming and giving us a board game, right? So I think, people say technology has both sides and all, but I think it's also the patience has completely gone away because I know I can order anything in 5 minutes, right? Okay, so now from the mainstream world, we move to the social sector world. So I think we have been designing tech applications for the sector for 6 to 7 years, and I think we have experts from different fields. Vaishali, who has a larger share of experience with non-profits, government. We have Gayatri, who I would not say struggles, but again has seen challenges implementing technology solutions at the CSR level or at the sustainability level, where she's required to collate all the data from the ground and also ensuring how the non-profits use it, right? And then we have Derek, who gives us an international perspective. So and it's an open question to all three of you, that if we see technology and we see that how do we ensure that our end users, right? It could be your internal teams or it could be non-profits. What do you feel is the single most challenge, or it could be a mix of? So I think my variables are, which we feel, one is, let's say, cost. So a lot of non-profits say we do not have funds to implement technology. Why? There is an intent, right? So the one variable could be cost/resources. The second variable could be capacity building, right? It's not just that you build an awesome application. It's also how do you handhold, how do you build capacities, and how do you ensure that's also being used and being implemented, right? Third is the variable which we struggle with a lot. A lot of organizations, and this is what happens is we have these new age incubators who incubate non-profits, right? So there are young college kids who would get loads of money when they start a non-profit, and they come to us and say, hi, I want to build an app and I have 40 lakh of rupees. And we say, what do you would do an app on a day one of your non-profit, right? You haven't started anything yet. So do you know what you want? So the fourth variable is, do people know what they want? So I mean, it could be these four variables. I think these variables are just to get you started. But I think the question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge, or what is the mix of challenges you feel which prohibits or inhibits end users to use technology or leverage technology uh, as it should be?
I mean, I think that it came up in the last session quite brilliantly. The phrase now is data is the new oil. And the truth is, I think I would suggest we could change that to data is the new energy. And you can source your energy responsibly and use it responsibly or not. You can invest in irresponsible energy like oil or more responsible ways of generating energy. And I think that is the big challenge with data, and particularly with data within the not-for-profit world. Data has a bad rep. You know, data has been used in many different ways inappropriately, and that's quite famous, you know, worldwide. There are all sorts of case studies, algorithms and what have you, social media websites, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we're all a little bit reticent to embrace data because we do good in the world, and data doesn't have quite that reputation for being a source of good. There are as many cases of it being used inappropriately as appropriately, if not more so. Certainly, the inappropriate cases are probably more well known. So I think there's just a huge philosophical hurdle we need to overcome, I think.
Is it more you are saying, is it like the intent? So people want to use data, but they are quite not sure. Is that philosophical dilemma they have? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Especially in terms of sourcing data. How are you going to get the data? Who are you going to share it with? All these problems are very solvable. And there are lots of cases of anonymized data that's very productive that we've even used in our examples. You know, I know compared to most men my age how much in calorie deficit I am. I might not like the answer, but I know I need to sort that out. But the truth is, I don't know how much calorie deficit you're in, even if we use the same platform.
I'm not deficient, but
okay. Yeah. You could have gone out and gotten that game at 12 o'clock at night. That would have helped with your calorie count. But I think I think there is a thing about using data that makes everyone wary, particularly in the not-for-profit sector, of the connotations of that.
Okay. Gayatri, would like to weigh in?
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's been, you know, three things really that are huge challenges. One is I don't think we're always clear whether we're not-for-profit, CSR, foundations, what, it doesn't matter, right? Who we are. What matters is, you know, I don't think we're clear on what we want this data for. And so a lot of the time where, you know, and again, you know, personal experience trying to build some of our MISs at Godrej, you know, a lot of the time we have all of these data points, 99% of which are completely meaningless and do not even answer in any way you know, to the objectives of the programs or initiatives that we're trying to monitor or, you know, or pull out insights or analysis for. So I think that clarity is completely missing on what is it that we want this for, what is our one overall objective, and what are the 3 to 20, whatever that number is, data points that are going to help us and help us track where we are in relation to where we want to be. And I think that's, you know, not having this clarity is a function of not having resources. It's a function of not having time. We've made that, I mean, you and your team, Swapnil, have seen us make that mistake, right? Where we didn't really put aside enough time in some of the phases of our MIS to really think through for ourselves, what do we want to see as a CSR team? How do we want our partners to use this? We didn't put aside enough time to test what we were doing enough. So that's one big thing. I think the second thing that we've seen is, and this is, you know, more true for our work in sustainability, is integration. A lot of the times there are platforms, applications, etc. But how does that integrate with the reality of where the data is coming from? right? And that is not a straightforward answer to, to arrive at. In the case of our sustainability, it's probably the most complicated because all of these different applications, success factors for HR, SAP for finance, none of them have, proper integration capability, even though our green sustainability MIS does, right? So that is a big challenge, and we see a similar challenge with some of our partners who already have systems of their own and applications of their own, which do not necessarily allow for integration, or where the integration is much more complicated to do technically, requiring revisions, on both platforms, which again is not an ideal situation. The third thing is behaviors, training, capability, right? And I would say also the way programs are designed to begin with, right? Not all programs are standard. Not all operations of a not-for-profit are standard or thought through in the same way. Not everything has a logic model. We know that sometimes when there's funding available to do a particular thing, whether we do it or not, we will still. I mean, whether it's part of our vision, we will still do that thing because funds are available, right? And that's understandable. Similarly, not all of our CSR programs are the same at all. Each has different indicators, each is run a different way. So how does one build a customized platform, and then, questions of cost, time spent, etc., are naturally asked, when, depending on the size of the program and its importance in terms of creating impact. So these are really the three things.
Okay, so I
from my
think a follow-up
perspective.
question there. So the first and the third point largely, I would say, where you said that a lot of organizations don't know, right, where to start, and we have seen it, right, that you collect data and then you say, why are you collecting, what is the analysis? So if you have seen this as a, I would say, as a challenge or a problem, and if you have tried to solve it, has it worked? So in the cases, so it has
Yeah,
worked, right?
absolutely. And I think for at least this was our experience, as a funder, we had to take, and we're a slightly different funder. We don't grant make. We co-design programs with our partners. And so, we had to really take a good long look, hard look in the mirror and say, where are we driving our partners crazy and therefore ourselves crazy? Do we really need to know if these 10 activities have happened? If if incomes are not increasing of our target audience, if malaria cases and dengue cases aren't coming down, what is meaningful to collect? So it worked really well. We sat down, cleaned it all up, and it's changed the way our partners report. We've had partners, you guys know this, who said we want to adopt this same sort of model and framework for monitoring and build a platform of our own outside of the programs we work with Godrej on. So that's been really heartening to hear. And I think what is still yet to work is, how do we build accountability across our teams, myself included, and across partner organizations teams. So not just the person who's responsible for reporting to the funder, but how do we build accountability at the leadership level as well, that these are the 3 or 4 points that we're reporting progress on, and similarly on my team's end. So yeah.
Good, good. So I think I would just say to the audience that, as Gayatri mentioned, that they don't drive crazy. I mean, they don't. I mean, the partners would not get crazy for reporting, right? So, so I think you can reach out to her, right, after the panel. I mean, so one of the sane funders who would not drive you crazy for reporting and for data, because I think that's important, where you chalk out and you co-create that LFA or the model where you can report data. Yeah. So coming to Vaishali, I think I would just like if you can also weigh in your experience working with nonprofits and also government largely, right?
Yeah, and I think quite a few of the points that Gayatri mentioned, also I'll kind of relate that to how the government works. For the government, it's also to do with, data. It's coming largely from a monitoring aspect, not necessarily a data-driven governance, but it's just about collecting data points about the program moving forward with no real space for course correction. So even if, I'll take an example, if we are looking at the number of SHGs being formed, we are going ahead with collecting data of how many lakhs are being formed, not talking about how many are getting defunct. So how do we then look at data? Two things in the government I would say is, how would we look at data that is A, usable, and B, useful? So when we are looking at usable data, how is the data collection mechanism going to be? Because for government, it is last mile. A lot of their schemes are absolutely beneficiary, community rooted. Data collection has to be participatory. If that data is then coming through, what is the collection pipeline, collection process, frequency? Who's going to vet that data? Because at the end of the day, that data also means that the person having filled it in, whether he's doing a good job or not. So how do we then, have ways to vet that data? And moving forward, moving ahead, who's going to analyze it for the government to say what's a good way, what's the outcome of that data? Is there any analytical bulletin that we can give to them, which we are doing for various governments in terms of actually saying that, yes, look, this is what needs to be acted upon. And that is where I think the whole data-driven governance model works in terms of moving that further and then getting a government buy-in to build it into their MIS.
Got it, got it. So I think a very interesting point which we learned much late in our journey, and I think it's an important thing. So when you start building your MISs or platforms or whatever technology platforms, often you start with what does a data collection look like what do you want to collect data. But now I think we have changed our conversations. When we now talk to partners, we say, let's discuss about the dashboard, what do you want to see, what do you want to analyze, what do you want to govern, right? So start backwards, right? So once you know that these are the indicators I want to analyze, this is the only thing which is my most important KPI, this is the thing which I am going to worry about as soon as I wake up, this is the thing which I look at monthly, this is the thing which I look at quarterly. And then you trace it back to your data collection, then you see that the data collection of 100 questions just reduces to 20 questions, right? So I think we all who have studied, I mean, I'm sure everyone has studied computer science in their academics in the school, right? And there was a term which says GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if it makes sense now, right? So if you collect garbage data, you don't know what you want to do it with it, and it just sits in your servers or it just sits on your dashboards also. And a lot of time people would say, hey, this dashboard is not loading and what I do with these indicators, because you collected that data and it's just there because someone said, right? The another important thumb rule which we also have learned is that how do you, for the field teams, if you see, every time for them it's like someone is telling them that, hey, collect these data points, collect these data points, collect these data points, and they have just become, I mean, for the lack of better, just data collection agencies or data input. And they're also doing it without thinking and left, right, and center. They're just data entry operators, right? So how do you ensure that data becomes a byproduct of the process, right? So you do a process, an Anganwadi worker would do her job, right? As she is doing, we make her life easier. And as a result, there are some data points which we get as a byproduct. It's not like that we're asking her to input. So, I mean, if you start thinking from that lens, it changes the entire thing. So with this Anganwadi example, I would like to give you one interesting example which we face. So it's 2 years back, we were working with a major foundation who works with Anganwadis. And we visited one as a part of the field team. And we came across an Anganwadi Sahika who had the app which we made for that foundation. Then she had an app for the central government for Anganwadis. Then she had an app for the state government. And then she had an app for another CSR who's working in that same area. There were 4 apps for the same reason, and no one was talking to each other. And I was like, why are you entering data for the same child, for the same Anganwadi in 4 different apps? And she's like, everyone is giving me money. Because she's been incentivized for entering data or collecting data, for her it's a livelihood. I mean, for the same data point, she's earning 4x. So why not? I mean, she's not at fault. I mean, we are at fault that we are not talking to each other and all of that. So I think coming back to, I mean, all of you, but so now we have also seen this narrative is shifting, that people are coming to us and saying, I don't want to collect data. can you tell me that and people are saying that I am sure there is some kind of data already available either with the government or some agency. Can you in some way leverage it? So by leveraging, can you download it, put me a dashboard, and then if there are already 8 data points, I'll just collect the last two or the next two, right? So in your experience, I will start with Derek. I mean, how is this narrative abroad? So, I mean, with the geographies you work with, let's say UK, US. So in India, the problem what we see is that Indian government also collects a lot of data, right? Whatever data the social sector collects, resides with social sector in its respective servers, right? We don't talk to each other. We talk each other in conferences, but we don't talk each other in sharing whatever data we have, right? Like I said, there would be 4 funding organizations, whether they are CSR, philanthropies, working in the same village, working for the same cause, but no one will talk, I mean, in terms of that what you already have, everyone will start their own baseline. With respect to government, they have a lot of data collection, I mean, but it is in terms of either it is not exposed publicly, or if it is exposed, it's not in a usable form. But it's not 100% true. There are some data sets which you can use. So how is this, I mean, how is this different in the geographies you have experience with?
I mean, it's a very good question, and I guess the most inspiring examples I can give are actually from the southern hemisphere, for want of a better term. I suppose what I would say that's true of where I live, and perhaps the lesson for data is the best data is shared, and open source data is invaluable. And I think about when I immigrated to the United Kingdom in 1996, what it was like to navigate the London transport system versus now, when you can look, because they very early adopted an open source data policy that allowed different people to create different apps to navigate around the city. It doesn't make any difference if you're using one of the search engine platforms or the Transport for London app. It's just a lot easier to get around. You know if a bus has been canceled or a train's not arriving. All of that is a huge innovation, and it's because of the open source data philosophy. But in terms specifically of the app, and I do think to the conversation that you were mentioning, it's so easy to get overwhelmed with data and try to answer 1,000 questions. And it's just like old school impact. The people who use data the best know the 4 questions that will manage and measure their theory of change the best. And, you know, data is not a solution in and of itself. Like anything else, it's about what is your methodology. And the best methodologies are always eloquently simple, right? And they're the kind of things that you sort of, when you hear, you're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? You know, that's so obvious. But clearly they're not. So the best use of data is refined, elegantly simple, and has the end in mind, like any good theory of change model or whatever impact model you choose to use. But I mean, 2 examples I would use. You know, I recently was representing a private sector philanthropy at the Global Partnership for Economic Development Cooperation event, which does create a very awkward acronym, JPEDIC. But it is a OECD-led initiative to coordinate international development better. And the most inspiring examples were from both countries in Africa and South America that have created open source platforms for monitoring the SDGs and the delivery of the SDGs. So you can actually look on the platform, and as, for instance, a private sector philanthropist or foundation, you can see whether or not your funding is additional, complementary, or what have you. So that's a macro example. But by far one of the most interesting and engaging and inspiring examples in terms of delivery was an open source platform that I shared a panel with in Indonesia. And I won't butcher the Indonesian, but it translates as Indonesian Disaster Data Map. And it is essentially using data from social media posts across multiple platforms to absolutely pinpoint where someone is in trouble during a flood. And it has massively improved the success of recovery in those situations because people do have a tendency to share right away.
Okay.
And combining, Instagram and Twitter and other social media platforms. Sorry if I haven't name checked yours. Is a powerful source of data and intervention. So those are the two examples that I can think of that really use data in an inspiring and sort of open source way.
Yeah, but I mean, very specific question. So, non-profits or partners whom you work with, when they collect data for their own analysis, right? It could be operational, it could be impact lens. Is there a policy or is there a, I would say, like a norm that they share data with each other? So, for example, if there are two non-profits working in the homelessness as a cause, let's say, and is there a norm that people would like to go each other and say, hey, I have this data, you have this data, can we share? And
I mean, it is beginning,
Okay.
but it's not universal. And where it happens, we do try to celebrate it and highlight it. But the truth is, there's still a lot of friendly competition. And very, in some cases, very entrenched and long-standing friendly competition.
Yeah.
And so I don't see them sharing data
Yeah.
too quickly because they part of their USP is that they solve
They have
homelessness the best, or they intervene in cancer therapy the best, or what have you. But cooperation at project level is expanding, and that I think is very important.
Yeah. So I think we also have seen cooperation and collaboration among these stakeholders we've seen. I mean, for once, I would like to see the cooperation and collaboration with the data because it's the waste of philanthropic funds, right? So, I mean, if Gayatri is giving money to 5 NGOs and they're working in the same geography, each of one of them is hiring let's say, a same data collection agency to collect the data, the socioeconomic profile of there are, I'm sure, overlapping households or overlapping communities. Right. So if there could be a norm, and it cannot be, one funding organization or one CSR cannot drive this, right? I don't know, organize platforms like ABPN or some other groups can only drive this, that at least these members. So something very similar to what happens, and in India you have a CIBIL score, right? So all lending organizations, whether they are banks or NBFCs, they agree that they will daily upload data of people who have paid them back their EMIs or who haven't paid them. So that next time someone gives them a loan, you can check it from that repository and say, hey, Swapnil has defaulted on its car loan or home loan, let's not give him a loan. Because there is an exchange. Now, okay, RBI has mandated it, but still there are voluntary associations which do that. So I don't know whether we are very far away from that in the social sector, but if that happens, I think we'll save a huge philanthropic capital on that, right? Any views on that?
I have a couple of points there again from the government. Here, the government of India, the central government, is largely, the policy maker. And when we go to the state governments, they are the implementers. They are the ones who are sitting with the data. What goes to the center is, again, a filtered data that goes in. Second is, I don't know the collection norms, because whether you can make the data publicly available or not. And when you're collecting data amongst peers in the NGO sector, whether, if a socioeconomic profile, yes, everybody goes to the socioeconomic caste census and tries to look at that data. But how are you going to really map it? However, the other way to look at it is look at public goods, look at a societal approach, societal platform approach, where you look at public goods. For example, in one of the programs in Telangana, we're looking at Anganwadi workers, where, from whatever, 136 indicators, we are trying to get it down to 26 indicators, which will give the same outcomes. Can we take that tool, not the data? Because technology should be the enabler.
Right.
Can we take that tool and customize it for different states, different Anganwadi workers, and then roll it out? So can we look at the public goods approach and look at the solution as a public goods, not the data?
Got it. Gayatri, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, our experience in this has honestly been horrible. There's no other way to say it.
Don't sugarcoat it.
No, there's no reason to, right? There's, in terms of sharing of data, even in a sort of common programmatic approach, a program that we've designed. That we have partners for working in the same geography, and we've done that very deliberately, in order to make a meaningful impact in that one state. To get them to sit down and talk to each other has been I mean, we've had to put funds towards getting partners to sit down and talk to each other, or resource, or have team members, really go above and beyond to facilitate this. So it takes a lot of investment of a mediator to make this happen in our experience. And these are, we work on very large public health programs, well, malaria and dengue programs in partnership with state governments and with the central government. And sharing data is just not, it's not something that government is willing to do. Even when we have to target high endemic, deeply rural, extremely poor, media dark geographies, where people are dying of malaria, something that should not happen in this day and age. We have to get a lot of this data on cases, testing, etc., unofficially. It's not data that will officially be shared at all. And so then to, run such kinds of public-private partnerships, which are, public-private in some respects, but not in other respects, like data, which is probably the most important thing in terms of targeting interventions and understanding impact and course correcting. It doesn't really happen. So, I mean, I feel there's a much, I feel it's a much broader question, especially with public-private partnerships of, what governments are willing to share with private sector, with civil society, what they are willing to share with each other, between center and state. We've had huge amounts of challenges there.
Okay, so we'll also have to do justice to time, and also I'm sure there are tea, drinks, snacks waiting. Do we have drinks, Kavita, Lavanya? Okay, so I think something is waiting. Okay, so I think we have 5 to 10 minutes for some questions, while there were some points we wanted to cover, but I'm hoping something would get into questions. Yeah, so I have a hand. So do we have a mic? Can you,
Hi, I'm Bhavna, and I'm from Charities Aid Foundation. My question is, this was the only session which deliberated so much in data, and I must compliment all of you to do that. Most often, the sector doesn't see data as that important. The resource crunched NGOs are more into making the ends meet than focus on the data, why, what, and all those questions. At the same time, donors also want to, give back to community so much that they forget the entire process which involves that, which includes giving to NGO or collecting data. They just want some fancy documents which can say that they have done a lot. Okay, so in these circumstances, in this context, what would be your argument to both these parties to adopt more technology or process to collect valid, useful, efficient data?
So first, I think, I mean, I will comment, like, not all donors are the same, right? Not all donors would want fancy documents, right? So I think there's no one short answer, but I think I would open up to Gayatri, Vaishali, or maybe even Derek if you want to take this up.
Okay. So I think the sort of root causes of this are a little bit more systemic than your question really alludes to, because we say that, oh, we're data, we're resource crunched and we don't have teams, etc., as NGOs, but we also tend to do a lot and not focus, on a few things, right? Which, okay, granted, not all organizations or geographies require like only one programmatic approach. Some things require a multi-sectoral approach to development. But that being said, I think as on the not-for-profit side, we need to be a lot clearer about what does it cost to create an XYZ impact, right? And what do we need to do to create XYZ impact, and what is the cost of that, right? What is the unit cost of that, right? So that funders have a much clearer idea that, all of these things that we consider or are considered, we don't consider them, but are considered frills, right? Like your MIS or having, an an MEL team or whatever, are not frills, that they're inherently fundamental to creating the impact, organization development costs, etc., and roll it into that cost, right? I think that will help funders who typically say we only want to do direct impact with communities, whatever that means, because you need people and staff and team members who are passionate and are growing to be able to create that impact. I think that will help funders to a large degree understand that it takes a village, and not just, it's not about just going and putting up a school or a digital lab or whatever it is that they want to fund. And I think the funding community also needs to be a lot more responsible, in the sense that we can't just come up with an app and say, okay, use it, we've made your lives easier, right? It doesn't work that way. Do we go and, we have to ask ourselves, are we going in understanding what our organization's collecting in the first place in terms of data, whether it's in registers or Excel sheets or however they're collecting it, and build from there. It can't be a top-down approach.
I think the other aspect also I would weave in is to do with capacity building. When we look at MISs, we look at systems, we try to embed it within the government systems. And there we realize while technology is a great enabler, we need people to fill in, the necessary details for it to be useful. So in that case, it's a lot to do with building capacities at the last mile. So while, the ISs and state services would have various courses to attend to, is a block and down where, you have to build capacity of the last mile about filling in the data, how is the data useful. And for example, the second thing which I see we all face with the government is every data MIS source is in silo. It's a very reactive approach to, okay, I need to map this, another MIS comes up in place. There's no dearth of resources for the government for that. So it's another MIS. Can we actually weave it in? Honestly, for a government, state government, we've tried to do it with the health department. There are 7 databases running. Till date, 8 months down, we still haven't been able to do it. So how do we really move ahead and try to, get that data, understand that government schemes are convergent in nature? And that's why I build in the convergence factor.
So much so that if you, we have to do this. So if you look up to the name of the districts, right, a different database will have a different spelling of a district. And this is government databases I'm saying, right? They don't agree on that as well. So, there's a census database which will have different codes and different names. Postal India is managing a different database. I am feeling guilty of posing this picture of India in front of Derek, but I think this is what it is. I think, and I'm sure as I'm in our state and as society, we're also improving. So things have improved in a sense, but still we are at a stage, and I feel that if there are 4 databases, each of them have different districts in a state, right? So, yeah. Any more questions? Okay, so I have one more question, please. Then we move to first. Yeah.
Hi, Akshay from Mulloy Labs. My question was, a lot of the conversation around data seemed to be looking at quantitative data. I just want to understand from your perspective if there is a felt need for qualitative data for monitoring or program design and things like that. And if that is the case, how do you all go about collecting it, dealing with it, because that's a lot harder usually to deal with. So just want to understand that a bit. Thank you.
Vishali or Gayatri?
I think that my answer would be, let's go one step at a time. Qualitative data is very important, clearly. Right now, I think we still struggle to get anything close to adoption of sharing quantitative data, which is by its very nature is more anonymous and less, you're giving away less of a competitive advantage if that's how you perceive the data. But I absolutely think it would be fantastic to have qualitative data especially on some of the SDGs, you know, and how they adapt locally, particularly. Whether it's education, healthcare, there are just so many different variables and so many different qualitative variables. I think that would be absolutely fantastic. But if I may, let me just respond to the fact that you may be slightly unpatriotic in your characterization of India. Let me assure you that if you travel, you know, your prime minister is very popular, but also quite critically in a very stable government. If you come from the United Kingdom, you feel like your dirty laundry is out there for all the world to see. So I don't think you have anything to worry about. And I would suggest that the government of the United Kingdom is not that much better at consistency on some of these issues as well. So don't worry about that.
So I think just to answer that, Akshay, I think we as an agency who's responsible for developing something like this, we get this question a lot that, okay, all your, whatever you have built collects quantitative data, but what about qualitative data? So to answer your first question, whether it is required, obviously yes. If you go back to the pedagogy of, rural management or how do you engage with communities, there's something called as PRA, right? Participative, what is it called? Participative rural appraisal, right? Yeah, sorry. So there, I think FGDs or connecting with the communities is very important, right? You do that. But now if you talk about digitally, how do you do that? Right? So, I mean, I can do an FGD. We are doing this in this FGD, and there are many qualitative insights which have come out. Is there a way which you can document it? I mean, technically, yes, but is there a ready-made tool which can do that? Very difficult, right? So typically people would do a voice recording and then do a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment. But in India, with such diverse accents, such diverse languages, it's difficult, right? So maximum people can do a word cloud and say, so if you do a word cloud of our let's say discussion, I'm not sure data would be the first thing, or I mean these impact would come out, data would come out, positive sentiments and negative sentiments. I think that only we can cover.
Just add to that is that, quantitative is a lot easier to do. When you go to FGDs, it's about, the findings would be as good as the person who's conducting it. So it also matters that, who's going to be conducting it, what are the outcomes that you're looking at, and it's a costly, it's a resource intensive exercise, getting beneficiaries together vis-a-vis a quantitative data collection. So I think the approach which usually is used is that you have quantitative. When you're looking at certain bottlenecks, challenges, then you move on to a formative assessment. And you look at the qualitative aspect, look at FGDs, and you see what is the cause to that problem.
We have last question, I think, Dhruv, you wanted to. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for that panel. That was lovely. I'm Dhruv. I'm from the Education Alliance. And the question that I wanted to ask was, we spoke a little bit, am I audible? Yeah. So we've been talking about outcome-based financing. And I think it's one of the struggles that I have been facing and I've been thinking about is, first comes inputs, then comes output, then comes the quality of the output, and then comes the outcome. So as an ecosystem, as funders, as partners, do we recognize that, and working across governments and working with a bunch of senior bureaucrats, they're like, Dhruv, don't talk to us about outcomes right now. We're worried about getting this to the last mile worker. We're worried about, we've not even reached the quality of output phase, right? We're just worried that the teacher has the teacher guide in place. I'm not still talking about how well he or she is transacting it. So in such cases, often my biggest qualm is that there are all these KPIs that I'm reporting towards, which are always based on outcomes, which makes sense. But then that takes a while to get to. How patient are we willing to be in and till such time, are we okay looking at our log frame, our theory of change, and understanding that there's a process that goes into it? And how do you account for that as funders in terms of how do you see that play out over a period of time? And what is the, appetite you have towards getting to those outcomes?
So how patient are you, Gayatri and Vishali, also with your funding
Our
organization?
largest programs, we look at a minimum of 6, sometimes 7 years till we see outcomes, or like we see that one outcome that we're chasing, like reduction in malaria or dengue in a particular geography, or a state moving from, high transmission to low transmission. Similarly, for solid waste, we look at solid waste is a little bit quicker actually. It takes about 3 to 4 years. But again, it's always a range. We don't. I mean, we don't even commit to our boards that these programs will be successful in 3 years. We say that 3, 4 years, maybe 5, and they've also learned how to be patient.
I think how we look at it, Various, is because we look at programs with the government, we look at better policy implementation, we look at system strengthening, there's no real target. We look at how much of an improvement have we got, and how do we measure it? For example, we can't be going and asking a farmer how much has your income improved, because he wouldn't know. He doesn't have a fixed salary every month to talk about it. You really have to go down to what is his input cost, what is his output cost, how much has he kept for subsistence, families, how much is he selling. There's a whole lot. So then also look at other assets. Has he got a color TV instead of a black and white? His income has gone up. Has he moved on from a two-wheeler to a four-wheeler? So those are the kind of things that you look at. However, in terms of programs and system strengthening, you will have milestones as you go along. And what we do is usually a quasi-experimental. We look at a control and a treatment. And we try to see that, okay, if the government, already for the government, it was an intensive block, they've already improved by 15%. If we've improved by 30, then we're looking at a differential. We can't really talk about, that's why we don't talk about numbers. We cannot talk about numbers. We will probably talk about fund unlocked. We will talk about better utilization of the funds unlocked. And then maybe at the end line, try to do a survey to see that did it have the desired benefit on the end beneficiary. So these are long term. There is no one path. So in terms of being patient, it is about finding the best approach, not the right approach, the best approach.
I would just say, consistency is so important in everything. And we at the Charities Aid Foundation are neutral or cause universal in terms of what people give to, unless we're asked to. But one of the things we've done for 12 years is create a publication using data from Gallup called the World Giving Index. And it tracks national philanthropic cultures in over 100 countries and has done so very consistently using the same methodology and the same data source for 12 years. Now, if you do my job, your least favorite meeting is from someone like a Japanese delegation that rank 109th, or a French delegation that rank 100, etc. But what it has done, even though it's a little bit contentious, is it has kept the same methodology using the same data and shared it in the same way for 12 years. It doesn't solve everything, and national cultures can be generous in different ways. But as an example, Indonesia has ranked highest in each of the recent years. The United States, on average, ranked highest in the first 10 years. So what it has demonstrated, just as a simple outcome, is that you don't have to be a rich per capita country to be philanthropic. And in solving the UN SDGs, there are very local cultures that are very vibrant that could be used to deliver SDG outcomes if we were better at embracing them and engaging them locally rather than internationally.
Okay, so we can call it a day. Okay, so thank you, Vishali, thank you, Gayatri, thank you, Derek, for being so participative. Thank you, audience, I think. I'm not sure how much justice we did, how much, I'm not sure, was there anything new which you took away, but I'm sure all of us enjoyed this discussion and hope we carry this forward. So, yeah, thank you everyone.